All right, thank you all for coming to MidCamp today. Today's session is a modern designer's workflow. This talk, I'm going to talk to you about our flow between design and development at 4Kitchens. I'm going to reserve time at the end of the talk to take questions and to talk about the tools that you use. There are so many tools that are out there. I'd like to share what I know, and I'd like to learn what you know at the end. So, first I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Randy Oest, and you can find me everywhere on the internet as Amazing Rando. Every time there's a new service, I sign up for it, even if I'm not going to use it, just so I can do that land grab. If you have questions after the talk, please reach out. I love to talk about this stuff. I like to carry on conversations. I learn through sharing. I learn through being shared with. It's fantastic. So I work at 4Kitchens. We build websites and apps for organizations that depend on large scale and unconventional content. So I'm going to start the talk by talking a little bit about history of design for the web, and we're gonna go a little bit further back than what you're probably thinking, because we're going to start with the Gutenberg Bible. This book, the Gutenberg Bible, was published in 1455 and was printed using movable mechanized type, which Gutenberg made famous. No longer did monks have to toil to craft each book by hand from start to finish. Printing presses made the job easier, faster, and more accurate. However, something was lost in this process. What we gained in speed of production, we lost in the art that went into the Bibles. Without the traditional illumination, the book lacked joy. It was just text on a page. And so, to strike a balance between that automation and art, when Gutenberg Bibles were printed, empty space was left for monks to illuminate and rubricate parts of the Bible by hand. The red parts are the rubrication, and obviously the illuminated letter is the illumination. And so this brought artistry back into the process, transforming mass-printed books into cherished family Bibles and heirlooms. So this dichotomy between artistry and machination is one of the core things that designers have been struggling with since the web's inception. So how do we bring delight and art to frameworks with tools that are built for automation and repetition? So let's fast forward a little bit in the history of web design and talk about how the web itself was built to be a document viewer. Okay, so if you turn off all the CSS and JavaScript, you can legibly format content, show images, and link between pages. And it is with this that designers had to start out with. And so they took a look at the tools that we had. I say we because I did table layout. So they looked at tables and realized that sometimes tabular data included images. And what if all the table cells had images? Then you could start using tables for layout. Okay? If none of you have done table-based layout, good for you. It's a giant nightmare. And so designers decided that they would take their images and that they would cut them up so that it fit into what the web had. So here we've got a Microsoft page that's cut into various regions, and you can see the tech ed, the headline there, that and the content underneath of it. It was so important for this designer that text be rendered in that font that it was turned into an image. So now that text is locked into that image. Now, I can't tell you if they had a proper alt tag on it or not, but who knows? So designers have always been struggling against the tools that we have to try and create art as best that we're able. So after tables came semantic design. So advancements in CSS helped the community rally around the concept of semantic markup. We moved away from tables, but we stuck to our guns with fixed width sites, using every trick that CSS had to float or absolutely position content. As designers, we had control over the placement of content, and it felt good. It was nice to know that what we put together was being rendered out exactly as we saw it on every screen. It didn't matter if there were different monitor sizes. It was going to be 960 wide no matter what. So all of this work designing on the web was generally done by one application, and that one application, it did a fancy animation, there we go, was Photoshop. Okay, so there were other applications like Illustrator and Fireworks. I know some of you may pour one out for Fireworks. I know there was a lot of love for it. But Photoshop was the most common to do layout in. Photoshop is an image editor. And when doing layout in an image editor, it doesn't work as well. You can do great color corrections. You can do photo collages and edit out imperfections in an image. But designers adapted Photoshop to use it for layout. And Adobe leaned into that. They started creating tools that helped it do interface design. It was still a bit of an odd duck. Still to this day, Photoshop is the slowest loading application that I have on my computer because it tries to serve every master. So, continuing along, in 2010, the concept of responsive design encouraged web makers to embrace the ebb and flow of the web so that every device that connected to a site was served up a website that worked for that device. Suddenly it was build once, use everywhere. We wanted to make sure that the iPhone, which came out in 2007, you could serve up sites to that with the same code base, and clients didn't have to manage two different code bases, two different sites. If you remember the era of M.dot sites where there were separate mobile sites, it was a scary time. So fun. So Photoshop was an image editor that was being hacked to design websites, and it met a new competitor that same year that responsive design came out, and that competitor was Sketch. So Sketch is the first of what I consider a modern era of apps for interface design. It's lightweight and fast, and it's built directly for interface design. One of the greatest benefits of Sketch is its simplicity. It's refreshing how easy it is to navigate, even to a newcomer. So one of the big hurdles to new applications is always the learning curve. I have a history as a print designer, and so I know trying to get a print designer to go from Quark Express to Adobe InDesign was like pulling teeth. And it was a very difficult process because they had learned tips and tricks for one application, they didn't want to learn another. Sketch is easy to learn. It's also a powerful and effective tool for general layout and vector drawing. You can share content with it and export multiple resolution assets. It has a great integration with other apps and plugins. And this is one of the big things, it's $99 a year. Technically, when you pay that $99, you own the app. You get upgrades for a year, and then if you don't need to upgrade, you just don't pay that fee until you need to upgrade again. So Sketch is more affordable than, like, if you're in Adobe's environment, it's one thing, but if you're there just for Photoshop, you might consider some alternatives. So Sketch is actually my #1 tool for design. So I'm going to go through the various reasons why Sketch is my #1 tool for design. So symbols are one of the things that I find most useful in Sketch. Let's see, the animation should, there we go. So symbols are reusable components. I like to build out a design system using symbols. So for instance, you can build out a button design, including various states like we're going through here, and use it in your design. If there's a change to the button style, those changes are automatically updated to all instances of the symbol, keeping your designs up to date. So while you can theoretically do this in Photoshop, in Sketch it's much easier, and there are more advanced things that you can do with symbols in Sketch. So taking what you can do with Sketch just a little bit further, you can assemble symbols that are made of symbols. So like it's turtles all the way down. Shown here are 3 color block symbols and 2 icon symbols. These are all used to make a flexible button, the download button that you see off to the side. This can all be put together, and we can replace one symbol with another symbol in an instance of a symbol. Yes, I did challenge myself to see how many times I could say symbol in one talk. But you can see the lines go, the icon for the download goes to the panda bear, where there's a drop down. That drop down allows you to select other icons to go there. So if you have a series of different icons that you want to use on buttons, anywhere from 3 to 300, all you have to do is save them as symbols, and you can replace them and they will dynamically appear there. In addition, you can change the text. You can see that the little pencil icon has the grayed out word download. If you type in something else there, the button will take that text. And you can set up the button so that the button will expand as you write more text. And then lastly, the colors. Because the colors themselves are symbols, the symbols that we saw previously, the blue, light blue, and green, you can switch between those symbols and change the color of the button. And so what this means is that you now have a component that you can use in your designs when you're comping out, whenever the client says, hey, listen, I know that I asked you to do 10 key pages, but I really need to add 10 more. Instead of you going like, whoa, that's an awful lot of scope, you can go, yeah, sure. And then you're just reusing components to build things over and over again. And so you're just changing the text of the button as opposed to needing to change all of the instances. So after you've done all of this hard work creating symbols and styles in Sketch, you can share it with your team as a library. So if you're a designer of one, you don't need to create a library out of any of the things that you do. But if you work with other designers and you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with the designs that you're working on, you can turn your Sketch file into a library. You don't need to do anything particular with it. You don't have to save it as a library file or anything like that. You just need to put the Sketch file, you have to host it in a location that's not going to change. So you can put it in a shared Dropbox, shared Google Drive, shared local drive in your local network, whatever the case might be. And you can go into the preferences of Sketch and you can say, hey, I want this file to be a library. And what that means is when you open up a new Sketch document, you'll be able to have access to all of the symbols that are in that file that you had. So that means that button that we created, we could drop those buttons into a new page and be perfectly okay with it. So what this does is this makes all the work that you've done accessible to the rest of the design team. And when you have changes, Sketch lets you know. Sketch will put an alert in the upper right-hand corner. It's small, it's hard to notice, but it's there. It says Library Update, and when you click on Library Update, it will tell you, hey, listen, the library file, that button that had 2 blues and a green, it now has a red version. Do you want to import it, or do you want to keep your file the same? And so what you can do is, if for whatever reason that library file is maybe one step ahead of what you were working on, you can say, no, I'm not going to update it, and then update it later. Or you can just update it and all of those changes will come through. There is a visual diff of the changes, so that means you're less likely to be surprised. So if you go to the library, tell it, yeah, go ahead and update everything, and then you open it up, you're not going to be like, whoa, everything's magenta. No one needs that. So it's really nice, and this is all stuff that Sketch does out of the gate. But here's where Sketch, plugins are Sketch's killer app. So Sketch itself is really good, and when you compare it against Adobe XD and Framer X and InVision Studio, there's a lot of similarities, and they're all kind of neck and neck, but Sketch's plugins are what turns it into a killer app. So those of you who use Adobe XD know that XD also has plugins. They, I think about a year ago now, opened it up. They've got an API. The difference between the two different plugin environments is that Sketch's plugin environment is you have Sketch, you can go to GitHub and pull any Sketch plugin someone has written and put it into Sketch. So it's a little bit of a Wild West, but that's nice because then you get what people have worked on and they just kind of put it to GitHub and that's about it. Whereas with Adobe XD, you have to write it, implement it, and submit it to their marketplace. So what that means is that Adobe is a gatekeeper. So that means that, for instance, we use InVision a lot to share comps and to prototype, and Sketch goes to InVision with the Craft plugin really well. Adobe XD does not have a copy of the Craft plugin to connect to InVision because Adobe is gatekeeping that and keeping that out because of the plugin environment. So depending on what's important to you, maybe Adobe XD is fine, but I prefer the Wild West of Sketch because then you get some crazy things and also some useful things. So I want to share with you a couple of my favorite Sketch plugins. One of my favorites is, this is called Sketch Split Shape. So as a designer, I want to lay out something 3 up, And I don't know about you, but like I'll draw the box and then I'll be like, okay, so I need a margin of 40 pixels. So I need to subtract 80 pixels from that width. And then I need to divide by 3, and then I like copy and do all of this like garbage math. I don't know about you. I have an associate's degree in cartooning. I don't want to do math. So split shape allows us to do it in a much easier way. So what you do is you run it. You can tell it how many columns, how many rows. You can give it a margin, and it does the thing. And then you can also do the thing again if you have another one that you want. So this might seem like something super small, but this is a great utility plugin that I literally use probably on every project. Maybe only twice, but it prevents me from doing math, and I'm comfortable with that. So another thing, I'm a big advocate for accessibility. I like to make sure that all of my websites have type that is type that they can read. So that is not type that anyone can read. Okay, maybe you can, but it's not really that good. So there's a plugin called Color Contrast Analyzer. And what this does is you select your text box and you select the box that has the color. And what it will do is it will do the analysis for WCAG and tell you if you pass or fail. It will tell you AA fail, it'll tell you AA passed, and AAA passed. So I work with a lot of higher education clients, and one of their first questions when we're like looking at style tiles or looking at designs, they're like, so Randy, like what about color accessibility? Like is this good? Is this okay? And I tell them, yes, it is, because I ran everything through the color contrast analyzer. And you know, I show them a little snippet of it, and I say like I test to make sure that everything's good. I actually had a client, we had to change, they had an orange in their palette, and they wanted an orange button. And in order for that orange button to work, we needed to put dark text on it. And they're like, this does not look good. I'm like, okay, so we made like an orange exception for the button to make it so that the white text would work. So it's actually like a slightly rust orange in the palette to make sure that they were getting what they perceptually wanted, but also that we hit the contrast ratios that we needed. Because I don't know about you, but I'm reading a lot in the news about accessibility issues, and accessibility I know is talked a lot about in the developer area of like Drupal and tech communities, but as designers, this is something that we have to consider as well. So this next plugin, this plugin is kind of what I call a super plugin. So this is Anima. This is a plugin that actually has a paid tier for its service, because it's all about like prototyping and layout, and you can export web pages with it. I don't use any of those features. I use it for one small, simple feature that it has, because it is brilliant. It allows me to create stacks of content that behave just like Flexbox. So in the animation here, you can see that I've got a folder that is a stack, and I'm changing it to flow horizontally and vertically. So it allows me to fix the spacing and pick the spacing that I want for it. I can also change the alignment of the rectangles. Again, Flexbox style, center align, bottom, top, stretch, whatever floats your boat for your needs. You're able to do this, and if you add new content into that folder, it will not only move it off to the side in the direction that it's going, but will also align everything. So this is great for like whenever you're making like cards in a design. You can actually fill out like the headline and the summary text, and when you do that, everything automatically kind of changes its height dynamically, and it is super useful and super amazing. I will tell you, if you are part of a design team and you are using this plugin, everyone on the design team must use it. I mentioned this because I recently worked on a project where I had this plugin and started some work and someone else did not. And whenever I opened up the menu, like the mega menu, which had like a bunch of different lists, and I had used this to like make sure and keep everything in place, the designer had made some edits, which no fault of their own, they made the correct edits. But whenever I opened it up, Anima said, okay, we're gonna do this the way that you defined, and it messed up everything. So it was only a 20-minute fix, but make sure that your whole team has this particular plugin. So the last part of Anima that I really like is that you can change the spacing between items. So, and you can do it using numbers. So you can say, I want 20 pixels between each of these, and it'll be 20 pixels. If you don't like that, you can type in a 40, and it will automatically move everything 40 pixels. So it is a super sweet plugin. It really, it helps build out designs faster, because that's one of the things that I want as a designer is I don't want to have to fight my tools. I don't want to have to fight Photoshop. I used Photoshop for a long time and I was very happy with it. And then I discovered Sketch and all of this stuff, and I'm much happier now because I'm producing content faster. And using symbols, I'm able to produce content faster, and it's more reliable as well, because then I know that what I've built out is going to be carried forward. So what this means is that when you have symbols, like, you can make these pretty cards that clients like, and they actually mean something because you are actually pulling the symbols that you've got for text and for alerts and colors and so forth, and you're able to keep this all updated in a nice fashion in a way that works. So I've talked a lot about Sketch. Now I want to talk about how that Sketch handoff happens to developers, because I've worked with a lot of developers, and I've given talks to developers on how to work with designers, and I've given talks to designers on how to work with developers. I can do this because I kind of do both. I'm senior designer and front-end engineer. So what I use is Zeppelin. So Zeppelin is software as a service. What it does is that you can upload your files into Zeppelin, and it makes magic out of things. So Zeppelin takes a bunch of different file types. So if you're not a super fan of Sketch like I am, if you use XD, Figma, Photoshop, they all go into Zeppelin, and everything that I show you can be done with those applications. So when you upload to Zeppelin, it will automatically create development resources for your developers. So developers will be able to read the specs, export assets, and have access to the style guide in a way that speeds up development. Okay, so you can see here we've got like some specs, some assets, a little heart, who doesn't like a heart, some colors, text styles, and so forth. And you also see across the top that it says web, iOS, and Android. So if you've got a shop where you're working on apps and web, you can use this to talk to those different teams and to give them the code that they need. Because right now off to the side, you can see there's CSS, and they're grayed out. You can see Sass, less, stylus. So, if your front-end development team has a certain flavor of CSS or flavor, particular preprocessor that they like, it gives it to them. So this is an example of the, the colors and texts and components. So you can see we've got a color palette, we've got icons, we've got tag buttons that go in there. So the components that you make, the symbols that you make in Sketch get uploaded as components, and then your colors and text styles that you have are also uploaded. You have a question?
I have a question about the CSS. Is it automatically generated?
Yes, it is automatically generated. So if I do headers 1 through 6 and upload a file that has those text styles in it, you can copy and paste the code for it and just throw it straight into what you're doing. Now, it is automatically generated code, so maybe you want to do some finessing with it because you're one of the cool kids, but that code is available. Let's see. Whenever there are changes, the team is alerted. There's an alert in the upper right-hand corner. There's a little bell that if you upload a new version of a page or if a color gets changed, the rest of the team gets notified. So designers, if you're tweaking that shade of blue to get it to be the perfect shade of blue, you might work for Google. And you'll also let your team know whenever you've made that change. So Sketch and Zeppelin are a magic combination for designing and communicating that design to developers. I want to talk about a quick story about this process, and then I want to open up the floor for any questions that you might have. So I have a client. I can't tell you who they are or show you any images, but it's a client that I started working with about a year ago. They didn't want to do design. We started the project. We needed to do design. It was an abbreviated 4 weeks. I was just putting things together as fast as possible. And I uploaded everything to Zeppelin, and I just was rolled off the team to go work on other things. And now we're about to launch. It should launch in the next month or two. I'll be very happy to announce it. I think that it turned out really well. And so there was 6 or 7 months where the team was building this, and I had no vision into what was going on. Like usually I try to like come to demos occasionally so that I as a designer can go like, hey, yeah, that thing that you totally did that the client passed, I got to fix some spacing on it. I work with a lot of very talented front-end people, so you know it's not that bad. But I'm always concerned about design debt whenever I'm not part of the team. And we're coming close to launch, and I told the PM, I said, listen, I know we have no time on this project. Please let me use my professional development time to like fix up some of these things that are just like misaligned. And I said I need like, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking like it's probably gonna be 20 or 30, but like I wanna have a good project for the portfolio. It took me 4 hours to go through and fix design debt. Like that's it. That's from me starting to submitting a pull request on GitHub. 4 hours to fix all the little minor changes because the front end team had Zeppelin and they were able to look at all of the work that I had done and pull the spacing and pull the assets and pull everything that they needed. So if you've ever worked on a project where like after the design phase, like the design debt kind of like becomes bigger, Sketch and Zeppelin working together like this really helps to like in a meaningful way to help your design along. So I think that I have what, like 4 more minutes. So I have 5 minutes. So questions. I can open the floor for questions. I'd like to know what apps you're using for design and hand off to developers. I can also talk about what apps you'd like me to talk about because I've played with just about all of them that are out there. So I'd like to open up the floor to you. What? Yes.
So using Zeppelin, right?
Yes.
What is the relationship in your workflow with Zeppelin and Pattern Lab, if any?
Sure. So what's the relationship between Zeppelin and Pattern Lab? Repeating it for the microphone.
Yep.
So there's not much of an actual connection between the two of them. So we use Pattern Lab as part of Emulsify for all of our themes in Drupal 8. And so there's not really much of a connection other than pulling out the colors for like the core identity and then the like typography. It does allow the front end developers to check what they've made against the design. So what they can do is they can actually like open up Pattern Lab and look at that card grid and compare it at whatever width the sketch file was. So like if it's 1100 wide, they can compare and make sure that the spacing is correct because in Zeppelin, it'll tell you the gutters and widths and everything.
Right. So you're still doing both,
Mm-hmm.
right? But Zeppelin is the easy way to prototype.
Zeppelin is a good way to communicate with the developers to tell them the information that they need to build out what they need to build out. So Zeppelin is not a prototyping tool. You can do reviews in Zeppelin. I prefer not to, but it is a feature that's there. Yes?
Piggybacking off of the Pattern Lab concept, what are your thoughts on having a source of truth for design assets? Should there be a source of truth that's a Pattern Lab type thing where it's a living style guide? Should it be a source of truth that is created by the designers and maintained by the designers? Is it problematic to have those two things side by side?
So the question is, source of truth for design. Should it be Sketch or the comping files, or should it be the code itself? And so that is, that's a question that each team is going to have to answer based on their own process. I personally prefer to use Pattern Lab as the source of truth because it is what is actually being used and distributed out to the world. And so if I had to, I would rather have to create sketch files from Pattern Lab than to do vice versa over and over again. Now there are other tools that let you start to do that. Like Sketch has plugins for bringing HTML into Sketch. Most famously, there's a React one done by Airbnb that will let you like pull in components and style guides. So it is entirely possible to have the code be the source of truth and do that. Framer X is really good at that if you're working in React, because Framer X, you can lay out everything like you can in Sketch, but you can also import React components and they look like and render just like they will on the website. So you're able to have your source of truth be code in that case, build something new with Framer, get it built, and then bring back React into that. So I know that that's not a solid answer, but there is still a lot of nuance there for that. So, yes?
Do you version control any of this stuff? If it's not code, like do you version control design?
We currently do not version control. I use what I call ghetto version control. Anytime there's a significant change in a sketch file, I dump it in a folder called morgue. And whenever OS X asks me like, hey, do you want to save both of these? I say yes, save both copies, because sometimes there are some other copies, and it's where old design work goes to die. And so that's kind of how I do it. If we were working in a larger design team, I might use something like, what's the name of it? There is a sketch service for maintaining version control over Sketch. And so like I would probably try and use something like that for that.
Right.
That way we could roll back and whatnot.
Yeah, cool.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm wondering what type of feedback you get from your front-end developers on how they interface with Zeppelin.
Mhm.
Like if they like it, if they use the code that's there, or if they're really just kind of looking at your designs and kind of what their take on it has been, because we're working on improving our UX handoff process right now to our developers,
Okay.
and it's always a challenge.
That is a fantastic question. The question is, how do the front-end developers feel about using Zeppelin? Do they use it? Do they go to the core files instead, etc.? So I'm also a front-end engineer, so I attend our practice group where all of the front-end engineers get together, and I've had the privilege of having a couple of different front-end engineers work on my projects, taking my designs and moving forward with that, and they have loved it. It has made their life a whole lot easier. The only thing that they've requested is that I dive deeper into making assets and symbols available in Zeppelin. So that's really it. They're just like, dive deeper, do more. They've loved it, and it's been a very worthwhile endeavor. One more question, and then we're done. Anyone have a question? All right, well, I guess we're done. Thank you all very much for attending. Oh, leave me feedback. I don't get better if you don't tell me. So if there's something you didn't like, please keep it to yourself. But if you loved it, go visit the feedback page. I'm kidding. Even if it's bad, send it to me. I need to learn. Send me some information. The top rated sessions will be captioned. So if you rate me well, someone on the internet will get to read me. And lastly, contribution day is Saturday. You don't have to know code to give back. Okay? So new contributor training is 10 a.m. to noon with Amy June on Saturday. So thank you all.
Thank you.